So one of the things you're going to notice as we tell our stories is that we come from really different backgrounds and work in really different contexts. So for me, I'm an individual contributor, and I work on a small team. I'm a software tester. We have a development team of about 8 developers. We have 4 testers. And our development claims to be agile, but what we say is we have agile development and waterfall testing. So I'm sure you've heard that phrasing before. Our overall company is really large. It's in the energy and maritime industry. So it's a pretty big company, but really I'm just focused on my smaller team. So I'm focused just on the 30 or so people in my building working on our specific set of products. And the other thing you're going to notice is I tend to use text-based slides because that's what I like.
And in my slides, you'll see lots of pictures. So I work in a different type of role to Carol. I'm a testing coach. The place where I work is the Bank of New Zealand in Wellington, so it's a financial domain, and I'm responsible for 30 testers who are working across 18 different agile teams. So it's a bit larger of an environment. We're all running agile. I feel like it's true agile, but I always get nervous about saying that. And as I said, there'll be lots of pictures. So we're going to talk about 4 disciplines, and Carol and I have color-coded both our slides and our person for your pleasure. So I'm going to be talking about business analysts and operations in my blue shirt. Carol is going to be talking about developers and support in her purple shirt. So we're talking about the way we build bonds between testing and these specific disciplines. So I'm going to kick it off by talking about BAs, or business analysts, and I wanted to start by giving a little bit of context as to why I think it's really important to try and build this bond and make it a really strong one. So in our agile teams in BNZ, we have 3 main roles in our delivery teams. We have business analysts, developers, and testers. And unsurprisingly, each of those roles brings a core discipline in analysis, development, and testing, respectively. So one of the things that I have started to talk a lot about is T-shaped skills. And this is not a new idea. T-shaped people came from Tim Brown back in the 90s. In the testing domain, Rob Lambert, Lisa Crispin, and Janet Gregory did a lot of work around T-shaped testers. And the way they talked about T-shape is if you imagine you as like a letter T, and your body being the depth of your skill in a particular area, and your arms being a breadth of skill in different areas. So when we talk about T-shaped tester, an example might be my depth of skill is performance testing, and I'm a really good performance tester, but I know a little bit about security testing and a little bit about automation and WebDriver, potentially. The way I frame T-shape in our agile teams is not about within discipline, it's about cross-discipline. So when I talk about T-shaped testers in the context of BNZ, I'm talking about something like this, where as a tester, my depth of skill is in testing, but my breadth of skill needs to be development and analysis, like the other roles that are in my delivery team. So when I say this, I'm not saying I need to learn how to code. I'm saying things like my breadth of skill and development might be that I review all the unit tests and just talk it through with the dev and make sure I understand kind of what they've already done. My breadth of skill and analysis might be that I can help write acceptance criteria or pair with a BA to kind of flesh out some really testable requirements for a story. So if you imagine that we have a team of T-shaped people in an agile context, it means kind of that my breadth of skill connects me to my colleagues. So for me, it starts to feel very friendly, and everyone kind of links arms, kumbaya, hooray. So this picture to me is a really good waterfall team, where you have people who work well with the next discipline in the chain. So you have a BA who's comfortable working with their developer, and they reach out to one another, the dev works with the tester, etc. So in our context, where we have those 3 disciplines, BA, dev, test, if this is functioning waterfall, then this is functioning agile. So to me, this is the difference. It's like getting it from a cohesive flow to a cohesive kind of huddle. And this, to me, is an image of what it really feels like to be part of a high-performing team. And if you think about how you turn that line into that scrum of people, it's creating the bond between BA and test. It's closing that loop. So because business analysis and testing are kind of traditionally at opposite ends of the process, I find that sometimes this bond is the hardest thing to get going, but when you get it going, to me it's the thing that connects the team and makes it a really strong, agile environment to be part of. So I wanted to share 3 specific ways that we try and get this collaboration occurring. So the first one is something we call Huddles. It's not a new idea either. So George Dinwiddie popularised a thing in 2009 called the 3 Amigos. Huddles is basically what we call that. So we want to get people from different disciplines together at the start of a story and ask them to collaborate from the very beginning about what each person will do and what their role on that story will be and how they'll work together. So Huddles are about creating a forum for collaboration, giving the opportunity to testers to influence the user story and analysis that has happened, giving the analysts a chance to understand how that story will be tested really early on, and it creates kind of a regular opportunity for that exchange to occur. One of the other things we've done is part of building that collaboration and getting that high-performing agile team going is that people will step kind of outside their roles when they're exercising that breadth of skill. And we see business analysts starting to pick up testing tasks relatively frequently. So we wanted to provide some information from testing to those types of people who are picking up testing tasks. So one of the things we created to help those people who get asked to do that was a pathway which we've called Testing for NonTesters. So this is very focused on giving people answers, practical resources and answers to questions that they might have when they're asked to pick up a task off the board from outside of their core discipline. So the lines that you're seeing on the slide are a step of the pathway that we have. And within each of these, there are a bunch of articles and resources that people could use to help them if they were asked to pick something up. So helping to build that bond between, in this instance, business analysts who are the ones picking up that testing work and the tester, is that the tester needs to get a lot more better at being transparent about what's actually going on when they're testing something, being able to articulate how we're working and what we're thinking about so that other people can start to learn that and pick it up too. So this pathway is actually one of 6 that I have developed. They're all publicly available on my blog. If you would like to look at this one, you can use the URL at the bottom right-hand side of the slide. And the third thing we've done is that each year we have an in-house testing conference. So this is a great opportunity for us to invite people from other disciplines in for a full day to learn more about testing and kind of broadly in the industry what we're thinking about, what our challenges are, where testing is going. So to give, and in particular it's been our business analysts who've expressed the most interest in this. We've had a few developers come along, but it tends to be BAs. And giving them a better understanding of testing as a role and how things could be different in their teams, and having that being a shared revelation between both the tester and the BA. We found it quite powerful. It's given the BAs a lot more empathy for what the testers are doing and what challenges are happening there, and it's given the BAs a lot more confidence in contributing to discussions about testing and helping to shape what we're doing in the teams. So if I were to sum up the way that we've been building the bond between BAs and test, we're kind of doing 3 broad things. We're creating a space for collaboration to occur, and in this example it was Huddles, so we have a team ritual where the collaboration can happen. We're pushing information out from our discipline, so we provide a pathway where there's practical resources, answers to questions that the BAs can use, And we're pulling the BAs into our competency and exposing them to ideas and kind of welcoming them through inviting them to our annual conference. So I'm going to hand over to Carol. She's going to talk to you about devs.
So Katrina looked at their relationship with business analysts and realized that there could be improvements. And our relationship with our testing team and the development team was a little more obvious. In fact, Katrina and I were initially inspired by this idea, double, double, toil and trouble, which is note will not end out well, which is to say there were some pretty obvious signs that that the relationship between test and development needed a lot of work on our team. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the trouble that we were seeing, which is, first, development and testing were far out of sync. Development would work on something for months, and we wouldn't see that product for months, which meant that the testers tend to think of the stand-up as a waste of time. We didn't have that flow of communication because we'd go to the stand-up and hear about something that we wouldn't see for months, so it felt like we were just standing there. Historically, we didn't have a lot of communication outside of really formal communication. So we'd talk to each other through the notes on a feature or through the notes on a defect. Occasionally, we'd have a review where we'd get together and look at a new feature together. But there wasn't a lot of communication going on between the two teams. That meant that testability was really difficult to ask for and to talk about. So there's a really good example of this where we were hearing in the stand-up that they were creating a new tool for troubleshooting a specific feature in a brand new project. They told us that that tool was going to be used for troubleshooting by support. It was something that allowed them to track messages that were being sent back and forth. They didn't see that as a potential test tool for us. They only saw it as a troubleshooting tool. And when we asked for that specific tool, they said, no, that's just a troubleshooting tool. You don't need that. So it was really difficult to explain and talk about why we would need testability tools. We didn't think to ask for that tool, which if we had more communication, we might have been able to think about that. And then when we did ask for the tool, they kind of said, nah, that's not for you. So fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. So we had to just create this environment for change. Now, I wish that I could say I had done all of this on purpose, but the truth is a lot of this comes from looking back at the changes that happened and trying to identify how we were able to, what we had done to allow those changes to happen. And my first favorite story is, it's not about bringing them donuts. Last year when I talked at CAST, at the end, when I was talking a little bit about, and I was asking for help about building a relationship with development, people were saying, oh, bring them donuts, it'll be great. And really, in our environment, that wouldn't work because all our devs are super health conscious, and I'm also not that kind of person, and it just didn't fit my style. So bringing donuts might work for a lot of people, but it wasn't going to work for me. One of the things that I know I did purposefully is reserving judgment when I talk about development and in my communications, because it gets really easy to fall into that, those darn developers trap. So especially when I talk with support and we talk about, bugs that were being found and mistakes that were coming up, it would be really easy to kind of, shove blame on the developers. They, don't know how our customers work or, try to say things like that. And I'm always really careful to avoid saying anything like that, because I know that that undermines my ability to build a relationship with development. So the big change recently that happened for us is that there was a workshop or training put on by James Bott called Reinventing Testers. And when that came up, I was really inspired, and I had the idea of inviting our development team to go to that training with us. Because, and I say I mean we, our team, we know that it's important to us to have buy-in from development if we're going to make any changes in test, because anything we do has the potential to affect them. And so we went ahead and invited them, and what was really fortuitous was that the lead developer responded and said, yes, I will go to that training with you. That was amazing. So now we've got lead buy-in from our lead developer. Our lead developer is someone who's been with the company 25 years. He has a good amount of clout, a good amount of influence. And so if he sees the need for a change, then he can make things happen. So he can really be an advocate for us in terms of making changes. So that really kind of opened the door for us in terms of getting that potential to make changes between the way and the development and development and testing work together. So then the charm is firm and good. What happened as a result? Some of the things that we've seen are, we were thinking of creating a team room for our testers. Right now our testers work in individual offices alone. Development specifically asked if our team room could be built next to theirs. Now that's not going to happen because of the structure of the building isn't going to allow that, but just the ask that they asked for that they wanted to be closer to us, was a huge change in the way we were talking about our teams. As a result of going to that Reinventing Testers training together, we now have this shared language that allows us to talk about testing together. And really, our lead developer was very inspired there because he was able to talk to other developers about testing, or testers with a development background about testing. And so they were able to speak to him in a way that I really wasn't. Shortly after he came back from Reinventing Testers, the development team asked for a tester to be added to the development room. So I feel a little like Pikachu. I choose you, Carol Sue, because they chose me to come sit in the development room. Really, that was the result of me being the person who had the least on my plate at that given moment. But so now I'm able to sit in the development room with them as they work, and we're already seeing some big changes as a result of that. I'm able to participate in some of the design conversations that are happening. I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to ask a little bit more about testability as I see them designing things. How am I going to be able to test that? Another thing that came up was that I'm able to speak for testers in the room. So one of the topics that happened at that Reinventing Testers was the idea of social distance. We recognize that we have a lot of social distance between development and test, and a situation actually specifically came up where a tester had been blocked by something he was trying to test and had waited many days to go to development to ask for help because of that social distance. When that happened, I was able to, and that information came into the development room, and I was sitting there, I was able to say, hey, this is a really great example of this social distance. So I was there and able to call it out in a way that I wouldn't have been if I had not been in that room together. So by creating the space to share, so by sharing space, by me sitting in that development room, I'm able to give feedback in a way that I wasn't able to before. And then I'm also seeing increased interest from the developers in how testing is done and what I do. So unlike Katrina, I've only just begun, so the end result has yet to be seen, but things are looking good.
Okay. So operations. So in Carol's company, there might be a tendency towards those darn devs. In my company, that equivalent is our operations team. So if you were to think about the high-performing agile team from the slide before, if I were to put the operations person into that picture, it would look something like this, where the delivery teams are the BAs, the developers, the testers, they're producing the product, and our ops team is still very much separate. They're physically located as an operations team, separate from where the delivery teams are. There's a big distance in day-to-day activities between those teams. It's not a cohesive thing at all. And a word that started to be thrown around a lot in my organization recently is Devops. The buzzword of the day. It's been around for a few years. So Agile 2008 conference, they started talking about DevOps. And it's been really interesting watching people react to this. So for testers in particular, I think because it's not dev test ops, people kind of see DevOps and they're like, well, so we're like, if development and ops start working together, how does test fit into this? So the interesting thing for me with DevOps, it is actually about QA as well. So it's a set of processes and methods for thinking about communication and collaboration between development, QA, and IT operations. So the if you look up DevOps, they have this Venn diagram where QA is actually in the picture, and they call the intersection of DevOps and QA DevOps, which is super weird to me, but okay. So you can allay a little bit of fear by just being like, yes, testing's still part of this. But when I think about this word DevOps, the way I take this is instead of dev as in developer, I think about dev as in development team, and that we want to integrate our operations team more into what our development teams are doing. So in an ideal world for me, this is about like taking that little lonely orange Play-Doh person and making them part of our Agile team group hug. So friendly. So there's again 3 ways we've kind of been trying to build this bond and get that to start to happen in our organisation. One of the first things we've been doing is making the development teams more aware of what's actually happening in our production environments. So our operations team are the people who know what's going on in production right now. They know how many people are on the system, what those people are doing, what errors they're encountering, and we have multiple tools that are doing this type of work, but the biggest one for us is Splunk, which is a monitoring tool. So we asked some of the operations team who do a lot of monitoring work to come into one of our testing knowledge sharing sessions and to talk about the type of information that they have access to and how that could change the way that we're doing our development. So some specific examples, if we're seeing a lot of errors being thrown in a particular screen of the application and we have a development team that's actually working on a new feature in that same area, then we can put together those 2 things and say, hey, as part of your work, can you also fix this error that keeps getting thrown? And even things just like the awareness of how much logging you're generating, that the messages are sensible, that they tell you the right types of things. That's stuff that we should be testing so that when operations receive this stuff, they have valuable information to use to determine what's going on. The second thing we've been doing in this space is trying to improve visibility of what's happening prior to ops receiving our products. So we have a continuous integration operating within our development cycles, but we still have quite a traditional old school release process where we bunch everything up and it goes through like a week-long release bus. I work in banking. There is a lot of governance stuff that we have to go through to get something into production. And so we've put together this pipeline, which is for us a first step towards trying to get to continuous deployment. So we wanted to visualize what the steps are from a development team basically saying this is ready to when the operations team receive this thing and it's in production. So we have multiple stages through this, and we're just using the workflow plugin of Jenkins at the moment. It's not the strongest pipelining tool, but for our purpose right now, it's fine. And it shows us whereabouts in the release we are, who's been active in the release, how long things have taken, who's signed off the various pieces. And so the operations team now have a view of what's happening during release week, who's been involved, where we're hitting blockers, and then when they receive the product, they've got some understanding of what's happened. So being better about communicating to them the testing that's been occurring. The third thing we've done recently is a shared project where we've had the operations team and some of our testers working really closely together. So I said at the start, we don't get the opportunity all the time to work day to day with the operations team. And I think there's a real different bond that develops when you work with someone 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. So this was not all day, every day, but it was a project where we wanted to improve our test infrastructure. And to do that, we needed to make some changes in our test automation, which the testers could do, but we also needed physical stuff re-provisioned. So we needed cloud-based VMs, we needed networking configuration, we needed stuff that sits with the operations team. So this shared project where we had a common goal, there was a really tight deadline for what we wanted to achieve. It it created the environment where people had to collaborate. And then once you've built those bonds with people, they kind of carry over into the work that you then do day to day, because now you know who in the ops team knows about the specific stuff and who you can ask, and you start to create those channels. So again, to build these bonds, when we boil it down, basically we're creating a space for collaboration to occur. In this case, a shared project, so the Selenium grid activity, we pulled our ops team and our testers together, gave them a common goal and said go. We're pushing information out from testing, so saying here's what we've been doing, our delivery pipeline pre-release, here's who's been involved, here's how it went down. And we're pulling the ops team into testing to say, hey, tell us about what you're doing, how can you influence what we do, and make that relationship two-way. So I'm going to hand back to Carol.
So on Katrina's team, the end of the line is operations, and on my team, the end of the line is support. Everything gets sent to support. They help users install. They're responsible for supporting the project, and they sit in the same building just a few feet away from us. Now, I originally come from a support background, so I immediately went into testing knowing about the value that can come from support, but when I entered the team, there were some challenges to be had. First, support is busy. Support's very busy. It can be hard to get their time. You really have got to, work for their time. Our organizational structure is changing, and so we now, support and test, have a shared boss. And you would think that would make it easier to work together, but what I'm finding is things like, one of the troubles I had is that I kind of waited and asked for permission to work with support on some things because we had a new boss, and I really probably could have gone ahead with it. So a pretty good example of that is that you might remember in the abstract for this, there was a mention of the lunch and learns. That was a planned project of mine that I never got off the ground because I waited and asked for permission about doing a lunch and learn with support, and it never happened. Now, because I was already familiar with support, I knew how important it was to grow the relationship with them, and there are a few things that I did very purposefully to make sure that that relationship was there, because I knew they had valuable information that I needed. First, I asked support for their help, but not just their help in understanding the program, but also their opinion. They know our customers really well, and their opinions really matter to me, and I make sure to show them that that matters by asking for their opinion regularly. I love telling them how much I respect them and appreciate their help, because support can really sometimes be a very thankless job. So I work really hard to make sure that they know I'm here, I'm supporting them, and I appreciate them. And more than that, I don't wait for them to ask me for help if they need help understanding a program. I go to them and say, what can I do for you? Is there something that I can test for you? Is there something that's been reported that you don't understand? Is there some piece of product knowledge that you need to answer a question that I can help you with? I love helping our support team. Now, as a result of that, there are a lot of benefits to be had. I get to help them learn the program that they're supporting, which means they get to do a good job. I get to help them do a great job. But then I get phenomenal customer representation. I get information from them that allows me to write defects like, this is not how the customers use this. They need a close button here. They need to be able to change something here. It gives me that extra detail that allows me to really help our developers understand what needs to be in the program in order for our customers to successfully use it. And then finally, I get this access to this great tribal knowledge. Our team, it's 4 people. The longest anyone's been there about 5 years, but our systems are pretty complex. So even after being there 5 years, you might not know the whole gamut of what our products can do. We've got testers on the test and the support and delivery teams that have been there for 25 years. They've got deep understanding, deep relationships. They really know how all of our products work together and what they can do, all their capabilities. And so that's a huge benefit when it comes time to test something that I'm less familiar with. So just like before, we've got this space created that allows us to work well together. And for me, that's just visiting their team room regularly, going in there, asking for help, offering help. As a result, I get customer knowledge that helps me improve the way I test, and they get a deeper understanding of software behavior that may be new to them. So by building all of these bonds, we're really enabling each other to do all of our best work in every case. With business analysts, developers, operations, and support, we're all working to make sure that we can do our best work and all our team members can do their best work. For me, that looks like creating individual personal bonds and making friends with my very small team. And for Katrina, it looks like creating opportunities and platforms that are going to allow bonding and creating forums for that, for those interactions to take place. We have different backgrounds, but really similar tactics. We're creating the environment for collaboration, we're pushing out information to promote testing and inform their work, and we're pulling in information to enhance our testing. So beyond just sharing our skills, we end up benefiting from being part of a software development team where testing is widely understood and where there's shared ownership of testing tasks and where testing is valued. These relationships allow that to happen. So to cultivate this environment, testers have to promote collaboration so they can teach and be taught. And we're really excited for any questions you have for us.
Hello. Question for Katrina. Thank you very much to both of you for talking. I've had some experience with trying to create bonds between teams, and particularly with having members of other disciplines thrust upon me to help with testing, often at the last minute. The trouble I've always had is how to learn to let go of those tasks. If I'm giving someone else a task to do who is a BA or let's say a UX designer, how do I trust that they will be able to complete that task to an extent where I won't need to re-review that task myself?
Yep, great question. So I see the same kind of anxiety in a lot of the testers in our agile teams, especially when they're being asked to kind of give a task away, or that's how it's perceived. And one of the things I really try to encourage people to do is a debrief. So the same, I stole this from session-based testing, and we don't do session-based testing, but if you're giving someone a task in an agile team, it's nice to have that debrief opportunity. So the way I frame this is you're giving them the task and they're going to do the task, but then we're going to tack on like a 10 or 15 minute where both of us sit together and you just talk me through what you've done and what you've recorded, and then I can offer any suggestions, and you might, as you're talking to me, you might think of stuff that you want to go and do extra, and that gives me some confidence about what you've done, and it gives you some confidence that your stuff has been signed off, because I think that anxiety is shared. Like the business analyst who's picking up the test task is like, oh, I'm not a tester and I don't know. So yeah, debrief is kind of our answer to that, is to give both sides the opportunity to talk it out, ask questions, make sure everyone's comfortable.
Great, thank you.
4 on the same thread.
Yeah, we had a similar situation on our teams, and one of the things that one of the testers, Ida, came up with was the concept of shoulder checks, so that the developers would do the testing, and then right at the end they would just call her over and she'd just look over the work that they've done, and it was a really quick and easy way to allay that concern.
Did you say shoulder check?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
97, same thread.
Yeah, on the matter of debriefing, that's something that sounds really cool to do. Do you use any sort of specified format in order to get the information that you really need, or do you just leave that personally for every tester to just have a conversation with the person they're debriefing?
Okay, so we don't have a specified format. We leave it as a conversation. I don't actually know if formats have evolved in each team. We just encourage it as a practice when you're handing off stuff, and not just for testing. Like if I was asked by a BA to pick up writing a story for a sprint, I would expect the same exchange to happen at the end of that because I'm not a BA. So I want to make sure that what I've done is okay and get some input. Yeah.
I think that's all we've got on that thread. I've got a question from the tweet printer from Elizabeth Zagroba for you all. This is a question from Elizabeth Zagroba. How do you build relationships and know who to ask when your team keeps changing?
Do you want to take that?
I would, but my team hasn't changed in a really long time. We
Okay.
don't see a whole lot of change.
Okay, so how do we know who to talk to when the team is changing? So my team changes a lot. I've been at the bank for about 18 months. When I started, I had 20 testers, and now I have 30. So we've had a really high rate of growth recently. How do you know who to build bonds with? In general, I would try and build bonds with everyone. And then if I find that that person is obstructive or unhelpful or unnecessary sounds harsh, but unnecessary, then maybe you'd try and filter some of those down. But I think I'm not very tactical. I'm just like, I want to know all of you and what you do and how I might be able to utilize you, and then I can filter.
Okay, that totally matches what my made-up answer would have been if I had changing teams.
Good.
One point I will make is that, say on my team, some of the first people I talked to were the lead support staff. I made a relationship with her very early, partially because I knew that she'd be able to direct me to anyone that I needed to go to. So if you can identify people that are going to help you identify who to make the relationships with, they're really great people to start with.
113.
Sorry. My question was, sometimes creating bonds with others can be difficult. So I was wondering if you guys might have had an example of where that bond might have been, or that they might have been resistance to creating a bond, and how you got around that.
So for me, the lead developer that we ended up making this bond with after going to Reinventing Testers was historically someone that I had a very hard time talking to. I think partially because I was intimidated. So I think that kind of identifying the reason why you're having trouble making that bond can be really important. Sometimes if you can figure out what's going on, if you can figure out whether it's you're intimidated or they have a problem that's making it hard for them to make a bond with you, if you can figure out the root of that and address it, then that's probably the best way to go.
And so I guess for me, I'm more on a macro level. So a lot of the way I deal with resistance is just peer pressure. So I have 30 testers across 18 teams. So I only really need to affect change in kind of 6 to 8, and then it starts to snowball from that. So I guess part of that is seeing it succeed in other teams. Part of that is just not wanting to get left behind. Like, that's kind of the broad way I deal with resistance, is just by trying to get some people to switch and then using them as like a look at how it's going here and trying to get people to go with it.
One thing I notice is that if you're having trouble figuring out how to make the bond stronger, it can be really tempting to try to move farther away from them and avoid making that connection, and you kind of have to fight that instinct and move closer to them and try to work harder at figuring them out so that you can figure out what your next step needs to be.
Neil Studd, 124.
Yeah, I had a question about a very specific kind of resistance that I faced. So it's really good that you found ways to push into a team and collaborate with them when either they don't have time or they don't know they need help. The issue I've had is where there's a team who believes they are doing testing well, and the perception from elsewhere in the business is that they're not. How do you get into a team who thinks everything's okay?
I have one for this. So I have a whole nother talk about peering, and so in a 10-second summary, we were doing peering in my organisation that was cross-team because we had some testers who were the only tester in their team, and they were somewhat isolated from the general test practices and how other people were working. And we started pairing people, so you would get an hour in another team and they would get an hour in your team. And I was the person who paired everyone at the start of the month, and they would switch pairs each month. And I did a little bit of strategic pairing for this reason. So there were people who were doing a good job, but there were new ideas around that they could potentially be using and finding helpful. And it's how do you expose those ideas to people in a way they can see the value in them for their context. And for us, pairing was a really good answer to that. I actually had some feedback from people after some of those months where they were like, well, I thought I was doing so well, and then I went and sat with this person and my mind was partially blown because I was like, what are they doing? How is that even? Yeah, so for us that's been a really good way to try and seed those ideas. Yeah.
And I think kind of figuring out where people's fear is, or that is to say, why do they think that they're doing okay? Is it because they're not getting the right kind of feedback, or is it because they're having trouble hearing that they're not doing as well as they think they are, or what's kind of underlying that? Because if it's not getting the right feedback, you can kind of adjust that feedback, but if it's more like they can't hear you, you can always come at them from a sideways perspective, that is to say, not you need to change to get better, but more like, let's try doing this new thing and see if it helps us or improves us or gives us value in some way.
We've got another question from our tweet printer. Veritex asks, what tactics or techniques do you think encourage collaboration and reduce social distance?
We just talked about a whole bunch. So do you...
That's good enough for me.
No, I think that, your way and my way, basically all the things we talked about are a big part of that. Making a space that makes it safe for people to interact because they're expected to interact, and going through and making those individual relationships and working hard at them and approaching the people that you're worried about. I mean, I think those are all things that help that.
I guess I will say one more thing on that. One thing we really wanted to emphasize was that it's not one way. So I've been to a lot of conference talks where people talk about promoting testing. And if you're just pushing information out, it's not collaboration, it's advertising. So you need to accept information and stuff from people and let them influence the way that you're working as well. And to me, that makes it a bond because it's both ways. Yeah.
All right, let's jump around a little bit. 89.
Hi, I wanted to say that I really like your idea of the in-house QA conference, Katrina, particularly aimed at the BAs. And I was wondering if there was anything in particular you did to encourage them to attend or make sure that they really got value out of it afterwards.
No. So it's really interesting. There's kind of a fear in testing and people who don't know about automation in testing that they might become obsolete. I think there's a similar fear in business analysis that they see their role changing and they're worried. There's a worry there that they might become obsolete. Like I know that business analysts aren't a consistent role in agile teams. And so what we found, in our organisation, a large proportion of BAs are really interested in testing because they see that as a potential role that they could move into if they ever decided or were, their role changed to a degree that they wanted to switch. So for the most part, there hasn't been a huge amount of testing is awesome on my part. It's been them saying, hey, I'm really interested in knowing more about this, or I'm being asked to do this a lot in my team and I would like to know a bit more about what I'm doing, so that they've been relatively proactive in coming to those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd suspect that them just showing up if they're not required to show up is enough to demonstrate that there's value there.
Yeah.
Because if you start kind of requiring it, it could get a little
Yeah.
dicey.
Yeah, we definitely didn't say to the BAs, you have to come. Yeah.
We've got another tweeted question. We have junior resource operation teams, and they're loaded with work. How to make them aware of DevOps and relation with them? The printer's not perfect. So how to make them aware of DevOps and form a relationship with them is how I'm
Can you
choosing to
say-
read it.
Did that
Yeah.
say Junior Resource Operations Team?
Let me try reading it one more time.
Okay.
We have a junior resource operation team, and they're loaded with work. How to make them aware of DevOps and have a relationship with them.
Okay, so I am interpreting that as we have an ops team who are overloaded and they won't accept help from development. Does that seem fair?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
So I think some of the stuff Carol talked about earlier would be really good advice there. So trying to determine why there's a fear would probably be my first step, because maybe they're just worried that the development team are going to steal their job or something.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking too, what I'm hearing there a little bit is maybe they don't think they have permission to talk to those people. So for example, for us in testing, that example where we had the social distance, we had this little bit of culture where it was like, don't waste development's time, go to them last, not first. So if there's a similar culture brewing underneath there, it could be really difficult for people to know that they do have the option of reaching out to the next step, whether it's the other operators or the other developers or whoever's available to help them, making sure that they know they've got full permission to use them and use their time and ask for that help, and even making sure that you've got someone there giving an example of that help. So for example, we weren't pairing. I started pairing. People saw me doing that, and now know that we have permission to pair because I didn't get, in trouble for it. So I think that knowing that you've got the permission and having the examples of people doing it in front of you, making sure that no one has to feel like the guinea pig in doing it, I think those are all things that help.
On the same thread, 97.
In our case, the way we approach operations when they're really packed was just offering help. When you sit with someone and helping him, he gets to know what fields are you good at, what kind of help can they ask. And from there, it just opens a communication channel, which did the job for us.
Good point.
All right, new thread, 83. Great. Then we'll go to new thread, 124.
This is perhaps just a clarifying question from the way, Katrina, you presented your information about your bonds with your BAs and your bonds with operations. When you talk about your bonds with the BAs, you spoke about T-shaped testing and how you developed your analytical and development skills as a broad approach. You didn't at that time mention operations. Do you consider that your teams have operations within your T-shape?
So the way I picture it in my head is, if you imagine the waterfall hand-holding and you tack operations on the end of that and then turn it into a circle, it's very clear in my head how that works. So it would change the T, right? So my T, for me to reach out to the people next to me as a tester, it used to be analysis and dev. And if the operations team are there, it kind of becomes operations and dev. And the operations team are doing analysis and test, if that makes sense. So it kind of turns the team into a square, and you have T's that go like that. Yeah.
You'll have to build that for me later.
Yeah, I will draw it for you later. So in my head it changes. So in my mind, if we were truly DevOps and we had ops integrated into our delivery teams and they were working with us day to day, it would be about trying to get the operations team to develop generalist skills in test and analysis, for the testers to almost back off of analysis a little bit, and for them to start working with ops more closely as being the next part of it, if that makes sense.
Would you ever see
Yeah.
them as being part of that huddle?
Yeah, so that's kind of where we want to work to, is the ops team being part of the huddle. We are miles from that. They're still the Play-Doh people over there. But I think what DevOps means to us is having that collaborative environment where the ops team is actually part of the delivery team and understands what's coming and is involved all the time. Yeah.
That's a place that my current team actually is at. We have ops within our team, and we leverage things like Splunk within our testing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to talk to you later about that.
Cool. I'll draw you some pictures.
New thread on 22.
Hi, this is more for Carol, I think. So at my company, we had a couple cases of, I guess, social distance between teams, and which is common, I'm sure. And one thing that was almost a silver bullet for it was co-locating, splitting up teams a little bit, having us sit together. You mentioned that you were sort of in this experiment of sitting in with the devs. How much of the bond forming and information sharing do you feel occurs organically now because you're sitting with them? Do you feel like that covers a lot of it, or is there still a lot to be done?
I'd say, yeah, that covers a lot of it. I'm personally kind of a socially anxious person, so I still get a little bit intimidated having to, turn to development too. I'm just easily intimidated. But yes, being in that room helps a lot, especially even just like listening to them every once in a while, kind of sit around and joke, and being a part of that helps a lot. And as a result of that, I don't feel as anxious asking them questions that could potentially make me feel stupid, because I already know that they don't think I'm stupid. So I think that works really well for me in particular. And I suspect that it will work for other testers as well. In fact, we have a plan right now that we're individual offices right now, but we're going to be in we're going to be in a test room where we're actually co-located together. But our plan is to almost always have one person sitting in support and one person sitting in development, so that we've always got an ear on what's happening in support and development, who can then come back and share that information with the rest of us. And so that we all kind of take turns building that kind of relationship and building that interaction. So I've got big hopes for that.
Cool.
Keeping in mind that we have about 4 minutes left and a couple things left on the stack, let's do a new thread on 80. You can 80 hold your, thank you.
Just a quick question. How you do bonds across Scrum teams? We started with one team, and they decided to make us most bond split us to two teams. They added a new third team, and they're thinking to add another fourth team to build the same product as an enterprise.
This is me. So we have gone through a very similar thing over a period of years, but especially in the last year, we've had some quite intense growth. We have kind of touch point practices that cut across everyone. So the ones in particular I'm thinking of are our code reviews. We use Stash, which is very similar to like GitHub, where you've got a online code review mechanism, and the process for getting review is that you ask people outside of your team to participate in that. So there's that knowledge exchange there of who's doing what and what's going on. We have Flowdoc channels. So Flowdoc is like Slack. I don't know why, but Flowdoc is way more popular in New Zealand. And so the whole tribe is in that channel. So we have product channels for our tribes, and everyone's in there. And so you get that day-to-day informal kind of comms with people. And we also have guilds still, so like the testing guild or the developer guild. So even though people are split by delivery team, they're still getting the opportunity to interact at a discipline-wide level and understand what's happening in those different teams and what's going on. All the teams are still part of a shared like product work, like prioritization of the backlog and where the work's coming from. That's still a tribe-wide discussion with representatives from every team, and there's still the collaboration happening there. So I think broadly, the way we keep stuff working is having that channel for day-to-day comms, having touch points in our process where everyone is involved together, and I guess it's sort of the same model. Like there's a space for the collaboration to happen, and people are pushing information out and inviting information in between the teams. Yeah.
All right, that gives us a couple of minutes for what is probably our final round, 4, new thread.
Thanks, Katrina. One of the things that I've experienced is when doing this type of work that having the testers in the team, they require quite specialized skill sets. They need to be quite poised, have confidence to be dealing with people in cross disciplines. So one of the things that I find that I was working on was helping the testers upskill. Do you have any experiences around that? Can you share that? What was your personal experience in helping testers get to that place where they need to be in order to be confident in their teams to help the other developers and BAs?
Yeah, so I haven't done any direct coaching on that topic where I've actually sat down with someone and said, hey, I think you need to work on this specifically and here's how we're going to do it. What I've seen happening organically is either people come and seek out that type of help or they leverage those skills in others through building that breadth of skill. So, example, we have a team where there's a really quiet tester and a really gregarious BA, and the BA now has enough of an understanding about test and the relationship is there between those two that the BA is kind of the advocate and voice of testing in the cross-discipline situations, but voicing the opinions of the tester. So it's like they're leveraging a superpower somewhere else, which is quite interesting to watch. So they've kind of recognised that it's not their strength and that it's going to be really challenging for them to develop that skill, and instead they've approached it from kind of a tangential way of saying, oh, I see that this person is really strong there, and if I build a relationship with them, like a quiet one, I can then use them as my advocate. And then, yeah, the flip side of that is the people who recognise they need it feel more comfortable about tackling that as a personal development thing, and will then start to seek out assistance in trying to build those skills. Yeah.
I can attest to that as the individual contributors. Before I started working in the development room, I personally made a point to constantly ask developers for more information about things that I wasn't necessarily technically ready to hear, just to start hearing their language and learn more about it. And the first thing I did in the development room was I've got a list of terms that they were saying that I didn't know, that I decided I needed to know if I was going to stay in that room. And I'm still working through that list, but I'm getting there. I think that there's one other thing I was going to say, and it was, one of the things that I did specifically, two things. One of the things I did specifically was there were certain developers that I was significantly more comfortable with, and I would go to them first. There were certain people that I knew loved it when I asked them to explain something to me. I made relationship with those developers first, and that really helped ease my path into talking to all the other developers. The other thing was that there's this piece that we kind of took out of the developer section where I talked a little bit about just like I ask support all the time for information if I can help them, I would also ask development for more information and demonstrate that I really loved hearing them talk to me. So I think helping people find those ideas that they can, ask for help, and people love telling them what their work and what they do, and kind of helping them make that kind of start on a relationship is really good.
All right, we've gone a couple of minutes over, so let's give Katrina and Carol a round of applause. And that concludes open season.